these bottom crops, cropping systems to help.
Opportunity crops.
Yes. We're putting the actually on 5% of the.
So listen.
Yeah, so I have to listen. We're having some trouble with it.
Okay, no, it's recorded.
No, it's recording.
Yes, good.
Thank you.
Right.
So
So yeah, it was just to show you a bit what we were doing. It can be linked with the low input system. So we didn't launch an exercise on that on the low input system team, but it could be an opportunity to link opportunity crops with the low input system team. Okay, more. Good. So now it's just also to summarize a bit what we discussed on Monday with the low input team. So we came up with the conclusion on two bases that when we look at G by E by M interactions on the impact on crop yield and also the impact on soil organic matter, we saw that models were highly uncertain in doing this link between the soil and the crops. So how much nitrogen can be provided by the soil to the crop? It's very important in the input systems because this is where most of the nitrogen comes from. Here on this plot, it's a bit complex, but I will try to explain it in an easy way. You have soil organic carbon here on long-term experiments. One color would be one experiment, and you have the yearly nitrogen mineralized from the soil organic matter. So we would expect model to have kind of the similar trend, like the link between soil organic carbon on mineralized nitrogen, but actually models were very different. Where you can see the NDC, you have a strong link between soil organic carbon and mineral nitrogen, but you have some other models, those expert model with the link is very different, the same from the STIX model, for example. So then what we have seen is that those models will simulate very different yields in low input systems without any input. And it's kind of a challenge for us when we study those low input systems. So that's why we are launching a new exercise, a phase 3, where we will try to find experiments where we can get crop nitrogen uptake as a proxy of soil and supply from the soil organic matter. So still we have to look at those experiments, and then it's a simple equation, but that is kind of working if we make sure we are not in experiments with a nitrogen leach on water stress. Then on the low input teams, we also talk about intercropping. So Adam gave a good presentation on the conceptual intercomparison of different models. So he has like almost 10 models that can represent the interaction between water stress, light competition, and nutrient competition. So he's now launching the exercise with datasets from Ghana. But then I'm just showing also some results from the PhD students we have in CRAT, just to show you that, for example, for STIX, the intergrouping version can work quite well. So you have the points that are empty, those are intercropping, and the points that are not empty, those are points that I was showing you just before. And you can see that the model behavior, I mean, the model accuracy did not decrease much with intercropping. So it was kind of good news for us because we were using soil cropping for calibration and intercropping for validation. We didn't change much parameters between soil cropping and intercropping. So it's not perfect, but still we have hit that it's not too bad with intercropping. And Adam will try to look at that, what happens with all those models. Then last slide, maybe because at one point we had the idea in the low input team to try to check what would be the pre-crop effect of a legume compared to in a rotation, because usually when we look at intercropping, we usually compare the yield of the soil crops with the yield of intercropping, but also we have to deal with rotations also in low input systems. And when we talk about integration of legumes, so let's say for example we have a cowpea here on the maize here. Our model, okay, to reproduce this link, like the fact that the legume would bring a lot of nitrogen to the next cereal. So it's for us, it's also a topic that we would like in the future to work on. I think that's it for some ideas for the low input team.
Yes, thank you, Antoine. So we got a lot of information. I think we can now open the floor for some questions and discussion on the information that you received. before we go to these questions. Do we agree with that? So what we saw is some work on opportunity crops with a fairly or very simple model. And then Antoine showed us that there is other work with more complex models, with the, I would say, the usual crop models, where we also try to simulate crops other than maize and wheat and rice. And in the session this morning, Ken also showed that with DSAT, they're also doing similar things. And I'm sure that some other colleagues are also using mechanistic models to simulate crops other than maize, wheat, and rice. Because I think we have to define also what opportunity crops are. But I see it often as crops other than the four main crops. So simple models, more complex models, opportunity crops, and then directly related to the low input systems, we are now working on soil nitrogen supply, sock mineralization, and on intercropping. So these are the three areas: opportunity crops, soil and supply, and intercropping. So are there questions on the things that were presented so far? Yes, Cassian.
I wanted to ask Tillis, in the maps you presented, what are the assumptions of the processes that are accounted for by the model that drive the difference between the different crops that you simulate? What is it that makes the crop different and then makes the sensitivity difference? And how are we confident that the model is capturing this well?
Oh, yes, there are several people working on that, so
I could try it if you don't want to.
Yeah. Let me start.
yeah.
So there are a number of parameters that I used to describe this. We have T-sum as one parameter. We have radiation use efficiency. We have E-base, the base temperature, the optimum temperature. We have cumulative temperature capturing at the 50% radiation. Those are the ones I have offset, but there are about 13 of them, which depending on if you are able to characterize this clearly, then you are able to bring about differences between the crops.
Let me add to that just a little bit. There's an I-50 that says when you've got 50% light capture, so that's helping the early part of the curve. There's an I-50 that gives the halfway senescence of leaf area on the tail end of the curve within the T-sum. And then there's a degree day sum to when you start effective grain reproductive. So, but I'll also say that there's a whole lot of parameters. Not a lot, but it's very simple. But the core has to be that you've calibrated to some hardcore data. And then let's describe that with using FAO statistics. There wasn't site specific.
Yeah, so we first started with site specific data, basically from literature. The FAO statistics and national statistics were used mainly for validating the performance of it. So in terms of characterizing the crops, we had to rely on experimental data.
Do you have experiments with paired comparison of different crops, or it was for all the crops, different places?
No, so like I said, this was a very rapid exercise, and we had to look out for data that was available for all the crops that we were looking at. We are aware that a few of those crops in some of the mechanistic models, but not all the crops. So in total, there were about 25 crops that had to be modeled within that short time frame. So we needed one model to be able to do this kind of analysis.
Yes, thank you. So the question that we have probably here is, if we go for an activity, if we want to develop this more within AgMIP, are we going to continue the road of simple models? Are we going to have exercises with more complex models, or are we going to have both? Yes, yes, please.
At least some of the crops, say cowpea, my guess is there must be 4 or 5 that can do that. So you could
Mechanistic models, you mean?
create what amounts to a AgMIP cowpea
Mm.
modeling team. It's obviously simple, be involved in that, and you're talking about which data sets you're going to connect with. And it might be 1 or 2 other crops in here that might have more than 2 models, but yeah.
So I think for at the beginning, I remember 2 crops that we had to use both the sites and simple, because we wanted to be sure whether it was doing something close to the.
So you
regular
check
models.
the simple model with the more mechanistic
Exactly.
model.
So the same data set for cowpea in this set was used for simple, and then also for base.
So the answer is, it depends on which crop.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And cowpea is a nitrogen fixing, so that's a different wrinkle to worry about.
Kevin.
Yeah, I would just say in terms of evaluating where to focus efforts, I mean, I think thinking through the use cases is important. For this exercise, we were asked to do a rapid assessment at the continental scale to help aid very coarse prioritization, but also to just make the case why countries should invest in that in the first place. And so if you go back to the maize slide, this was what got a lot of use in that scenario, because they just needed to make the case that a diverse mix of crops should be invested in to bolster maize-based systems across Africa. And if not, this is the vulnerability we can demonstrate visually. So this is a very specific use case. And that's why we did this, quick, simple model to get that information in time while they were raising funds. Now we're a little bit past that. We can answer different questions that maybe are more regional, national level, I think. So it's really up to the group in terms of what approach they want to take. But.
Yes, very clear, yes. So because sorghum finger millet, we know how to model that with DSAT with sticks. So I don't think that we have problems with those, and with other models also, with those crops. Or, Gratien, you are not agreeing there. I'll come to you.
Let me make a little comment about maize. Ceres maize has pretty well been one of the dominant models used in that analysis. But it doesn't have a separate temperature distinction on grain set versus grain growth rate. And in my experience with the APSIM DSAT comparisons of maize, Ceres maize is predicting too much temperature, elevated temperature reduction in yield. So be wary of that statement about maize being the most vulnerable. That's and you can play with life cycles to totally offset problem because it shortens, under warming.
But Gratien showed this morning a very clear photo also, where maize was completely dead and sorghum was still.
Well, that's another story. But I've also seen the situation where sorghum survives the drought and then you get head exertion. Yeah, really late.
And you get what, sorry?
We had an experiment where we did a drought study and we stopped the experiment because basically they almost died. And we put them out and then they were receiving rainfall and water and we had head exertion about a month later.
Yeah, so
Mostly sterile grains.
Was it
I
that?
think sorghum has tremendous delay capability. That's what was happening in the elevated temperature studies that we had. Tremendous delay ability. Maize does not.
But do the model capture that accurately?
Oh, I don't think the models have that.
From Los Angeles, IX something like
Yeah.
that.
We should invest in that, Mark, in trying to get these experiments where we can get a comparison of different crops and see whether, because you can say, yeah, this at sorghum is okay, this at maize is okay. You go to separate experiments and you're okay because you get a good fit.
Hmm.
When you put them together in similar sort, similar environment, you see that they behave completely differently.
Yes,
I'm not too sure if the model can take.
but you agree we are much more advanced with finger millet and sorghum than with what we have here. Cocoyam, taro, sweet potato, yams.
Yes.
And sorry, between brackets, also you can see the clear link between opportunity crops and low input systems. And we are biased here, but we are talking about opportunity crops in this context, in tropical situations. I'm not sure whether people are interested, maybe they are, in crops, in opportunity crops in the Northern Hemisphere. I don't know whether people are working on that within the AgMIP community. Is there somebody here? And now you can talk, sorry.
That would actually be Lon? Yeah, sorry. Just a brief background, we are working with the EPIC crop model.
Yeah.
And this is one of the models that's mechanistic, and we have crop parameterizations for about 100 crops, including some of those that are mentioned here. But for many of those crops, we don't know what the parameters are based on. So that's one of the reasons we are basically power users. We are not developing the EPIC models. Those who know the community know it has been developed at USDA. And so we are not modeling those crops because we cannot evaluate them and we wouldn't be happy with that. And for us, this would be a great opportunity, like Ken showed in the morning, his validations, evaluations, calibrations for some of those crops, if we could do some experiments like that. And to your last question, for the Northern Hemisphere, we have started, I don't know whether you can call them opportunity crops. I would rather call them neglected crops like vegetables that you can also simulate with EPIC, but in Europe, we are confident that those are typically cultivated in high input systems. So for us, it's then good enough to use NUTS3 yield data or production data, and we can at least roughly evaluate whether we are doing good enough there. But then for a region like Sub-Saharan Africa, where you would do an auto calibration based on national statistics on FAO data, you can tweak your harvest index, you can deplete your soil nutrients, you can tune your maximum PDI. So I wouldn't even know how to calibrate to this with such a mechanistic model. And there, I think such a field scale exercise would be super helpful for teams like us, so that we can really have some trust in those crops that we can in principle simulate. And I think for us, it would also be very relevant. Like we are actually part of the GGCMI community. So we are also interested in global scale simulations. And we know also from the econ models that in principle, they need information on those crops that have higher nutritional value.
So in your community,
points, I hope not too much.
No, which crops are you simulating now to have this clear?
Well, the crops that we trust in, I would say, are kind of the Mirka crops. It's like something like major 20 crops. It's like the major cereals. Sugarcane, we know we do good enough. Sugar beets, so there are some roots and tubers. Those are the crops we run globally. But we have in our crop parameter file also taro and yams, etc. But we don't even know where those, like it's a model that has been developed since the 80s and continually extended. And some of those parameterizations have been published in the literature, but for some of them, we don't even know where the parameters come from. So that's why we don't model those. We model only those crops in an applied way for which we can have enough trust. So most of the crops we have listed here are in principle there, but we simply don't do them because we would want to do first some AgMIP pilots and see, can we reliably simulate them.
In theory, you could do a similar exercise, like we see here.
Yes, we could in principle, yeah. But then if we were off, and I would expect that in some countries we may be off, especially if you look at millets. Like millets are so heterogeneous, it's actually a different genus of plants. So I would first want to see like what millet can I simulate at the field scale before I apply this at the continental scale and look for data what millet is going where.
Yes, please.
Yeah, so I think one way we could approach this will be rather more at the point scale level, to be certain that we are able to properly represent all the processes like biomass accumulation. That is, if we would have access to good data sets, so that like the other established crops, we go through a similar exercise with some of the crops. And again, it will also depend on what data is available or what experiments are currently ongoing, what crop models people are already using for this kind of exercise.
Yes, thank you. Before we try to make progress, are there still other points of discussion, questions? Yes, please.
Where Dillis is going, because I would think that this exercise, doing a large spatial simulation with something's already calibrated, is one exercise. But then going back to say pick one crop, 2 or 3, and you do a multi-model evaluation against the real hard data for wherever it is. That's a different exercise in my view. It's model intercomparison, looking at processes and not worrying about the spatial implications of that. Yeah.
Okay. So are there other comments or questions? No. So then let's try to make progress. We are making progress, but so if we go back to the title, we have opportunity crops and we have low input agriculture systems. As you know, we have already an activity group or an AgMIP team around low input systems. The first question is, do we want to have a new AgMIP team around opportunity crops? Or do we put that in?
I think you could somewhat combine that. Let's just say millet is one. Yeah. Maybe half a dozen models. And what would be your topic? It's to help calibrate the model, but you're going to have data that has the full range of good fertilization, water, to the low input. So you could put that together, I think, but one crop at a time. It would be a millet low input. When you're looking at low input, you need the opposite part of the.
Yes. So you go for that. So you say we don't need to try to create an AgMIP team opportunity crops.
For each one, well, you already have a low input team.
Yes.
But you've looked at maize.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Only.
Are there other opinions about this, or the same opinion, or?
If we want to achieve something, we have to keep as simple as possible and already expanding, going away from maize and adding a new crop. Some type of intercomparison would really help. But that would go for legume first.
Legumes first.
Either groundnut or cowpea. Because then eventually we have maize already and we'd be able to compare maybe for similar locations, similar climates. What's the difference between the crops?
So we are here now. Which groups people are needed? So we say we try to have a group around legumes to start with.
No.
Yes.
I said no.
I don't think you should combine it.
Yes, your name. I have.
Sue Walker.
Ah, okay. Yes.
I don't think we should combine the low input and the opportunity crops. No,
And why?
I don't think so. Because there's so many opportunity crops and the low input systems are looking at the natural resources and the fertilizer inputs and those things. Yeah. And the opportunity crops, there's just so many different ones and it's a huge task if we're going to do it properly. So to have it watered down in with the low input systems, I think it's not good.
So you run many opportunity crops at one time?
Yeah, some people did that already.
Yeah, but then we need resources.
But
Yes, first, Alpha was first.
yeah, I think we should first define what is opportunity crops, because those crop you are calling opportunity are main crop
Yes, I know.
in the areas where low inputs is the main content.
Okay,
So-
I know that. We discussed that together.
Okay.
So, but let's call it crops other than, what is it? Maize, wheat, rice. That's it. And soybean, yeah.
But why those? Because
We may call it differently.
They are well modeled or they are important or what?
Plus, the gridded modelers have done that.
Well, if I could just respond very quickly.
Yes, please.
We've debated this question for many days with experts from, every part of Africa. And so you're always going to have a different definition, and what people see opportunity in can be very subjective. So I think people see, in some respect, it's relative. Sorghum might be underinvested in relative to these other crops, even though it is much more invested in relative to fonio. But we had to draw a line somewhere through the whole process, and so we basically decided and it would be anything other than these 4 heavily invested in crops.
Yes.
But there's a spectrum, and I think it's important to recognize there's opportunity crops that are more well developed, like sorghum, and that we need to treat a little bit differently than fonio. And so I think keeping that sense of there's a spectrum of opportunity within these crops is important. But we had to make a line somewhere.
Yes. Thank you. Heidi.
I would also be in favor of having 2 separate teams, but that there could be cross fertilization, because I think you guys do really special things looking. We know it's soil, organic matter, mineralization, and intercropping, where you really look at the process level. And I think the economics work at this global level or even continental. They do need this information for nutrition assessments, risk assessments, and they don't need to get intercropping right to do that at that level. So just to support the idea of 2 teams, but with cross.
Okay. Let's go.
No.
Let's go for the scenario. Let's go for the scenario. We create a new team. So then the follow-up question is, who is willing to lead that? Either somebody here in the group that is willing to lead that. Limba, you want to? No, we are already. There is, I guess you all know, when you start an activity, and then we come to this question, you need some funding. I mean, you need human resources, which means funding. We at CIRAT, we had always, by leading or coordinating the low input AgMIP team, we had always some funding to contract a postdoc, which is very important if you want really to get that activity going on and make progress. So that a postdoc or somebody who started, that was first Gatien, then Antoine, and now we have a new position. So we are sure that we can continue. So if we start up a new activity, we also have to make sure that there is some human resources around that. So do we have that? Is somebody seeing that we... Yes, please.
I've got an ongoing project that is focusing on these opportunity crops and modeling them.
Yes, that's very good.
In Southern Africa. So we do have a postdoc who is already doing this work. And I think I'm going to volunteer Tony in his absence. Tony Khan. Yeah, but I think
Pitch him. He's here in the building somewhere.
And what crop?
we're working with 13. How many is it? 13 or 17?
I think the priority
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll jump in and say that I would be willing to help somebody with cowpea, but I don't want to lead it.
Yeah, so
Got a lot of
coffee is one of
interest.
the crops that has been worked on. Bambara is there.
So
Most of the crops that are listed on VAX are being worked on.
so it means that you think that this is South
just-
Africa, the institute,
Yeah, South Africa. I'm just saying
the
that,
research institute.
yeah, just saying that there is capacity in
Yeah.
terms of human resources.
Okay, that's
So that if we need to do something, there's some hands on deck that we could deploy, at least as a coordinator or someone to say this is the person that people link into.
So what that person in the first instance has to do is to get a good set of data together for the crop that you want to address or the crops you want to address, good data sets, then test those data sets, meaning run 1 or 2 models against the data set, and then contact other modeling groups. But there we can help a lot because we are several here who have good contacts with modeling groups. Contact those modeling groups, send out the protocols, and then give them time to run the model for that specific crop and that specific experiment, and then analyze the data, which is quite a lot of, yes, and that's the postdoc. There you need a postdoc.
But yeah, no, let me, just that Tony is not in here, but I'll bounce it with him.
Okay.
Let me throw one more wrinkle with this. If it's cowpea, then you would want IITA to be involved in some way. Does anybody know? Think about the international centers that specialize in these crops.
I'm a visiting scientist at
Yes.
IITA, and there is a colleague.
Okay, so IITA would be a great place, and maybe they have somebody who would like to do cowpea project of some sort.
Behind you.
See ya.
Sorry.
See ya. Take the mic.
My bag.
Do you have more data?
Yes, we've got colleagues who are working on coffee, especially in Nigeria, Kano. They are most involved in coffee breeding. But to be honest, I think I'm not really sure of what they're doing. So I can't volunteer for them or for anyone. But I could help out. I think it's really good connection.
Write his name down.
No,
Thanks for volunteer.
So yeah, Cassian.
You need a mic. I think
It's for people online.
Yeah, okay, sorry. My favorite cowpea all around this, I think it's a great idea to focus on one of these legumes. One big issue that we're facing in all the calibration reviews is that this cowpea or even the groundnut, very hard to find data without testing diseases, even on station. So I'm just wondering,
Especially groundnut.
yeah,
Yeah.
and cowpea as well, aphids and thrips, all kinds of pest and diseases. So
Stay positive, please.
could that be that the first step is just to implement a proper experiment?
Yeah.
Kevin.
Can I just,
Sorry, can I just
Yeah.
ask for the colleagues online? Please, I hope you can follow the discussion, and if you want to intervene, raise your hand, please. Yes, please.
yeah, so I think, I mean, yes, there's the traditional developing an AgMIP exercise approach that we could take. I think there are some elements to the VAX, concept that we wanted to incorporate from the beginning. And some of that is, maybe slightly different. So an emphasis on the nutritional components of the crops is useful. I think a lot of it is, it's a little bit different because these are crops that are hindered by many different elements. And we first need to have an understanding about what, to Gatien's point, why are they being hindered? Why is their yield potential being so hindered? It could be pest. It could be, issues related to Fonya's tiny seeds that, are hard to process. And so I think taking a step back and doing some work to prioritize which crops we want to focus on is useful, because I think part of the value of VAX in the broader scheme of things is people want to develop these opportunity crops, breeders don't know which crops are the most promising to work on. And so providing some information to breeders to say, not just these have some climate resilient yield potential because we modeled it, but also here are some of the traits that need to unlock that yield potential. That's like a very valuable kind of package of information to actually scale up the adoption of opportunity crops. So I'm advocating maybe for a little bit of a different, not just to, maybe we don't need just to make better model ensembles, but think about some of these other systemic aspects as well.
Yes, thank you. Is there some comment on what Kevin just said? Then I go to you. Or is that clear? Because I think it's a very important comment. We take a bit of another strategy here, no? Lindbergh.
Yeah, so I think in line with Kevin's comment.
Okay.
And also the other Kevin that presented, or that was in panel as well, Tuesday, he's leading Dryland's crop program for Senate. A lot of these crops that have been listed as opportunity crops is part of his portfolio. We could literally, he asked if we could assist one way or the other in terms of developing this program further than what it is. And he does want modeling expertise within his program, but he also needs to, I'm hoping the guidance program would then create opportunities to have experiments that allow us to then look at the traits that are important, look at why certain maybe yielding to see image affect these particular crops. So already in Senate, there's an opportunity. So maybe it is now creating or coming up with a statement or I don't know, suggestion or I don't know, the concept note, then say this is what we can do for you. How can you then assist in terms of moving forward the research around these crops? So in terms of funding those that they and also the network for people, Kevin actually said that he's there and he's willing to
see.
Yes.
Okay. That's good news.
Say it, we're all there, we're all listening, right?
So you're also volunteering somebody who's not in the room.
Nobody wants to sign up.
I spoke to Kevin, and I think we did talk about, can we put together some sort of compelling pitch around integrating modeling with these breeding initiatives and bring that to funders. And I think, we could do that at just the broad AgMIP level and have in mind, okay, this actually would work best if this was more of a collaborative effort across teams. So, I mean, that's definitely one way to go as far as funding. It's a tricky funding environment.
Okay, so now my question, do we need here to define the list of crops or the first crop we had some discussion? Ken was saying
you list cowpea and groundnut.
Okay.
And you ask somebody else their favorite.
Cowpea, groundnut.
I mean, I think it would be interesting to look at all the crops that, the 19 that we prioritized. I know Tafadzwa has said you have a list that you are working on. There's other examples in the literature of people doing this prioritization, like Martin van Zonneveld, where they have a prioritization list. So putting those lists together, seeing where the common crops are, and then seeing which models are.
You are saying 19, 18, but
I would definitely
realistic.
I would add millet and sorghum then, 2 more, and that picks up the nitrogen limitation. I also know pretty good data sets on millet, groundnut.
Realistic.
Yeah.
If we say
that's the problem is who's doing it.
Yes.
We're not wanting to.
So I think
ourselves.
Granite was
Right.
out of the list of opportunity
Yeah.
crops. granules was said to be heavily invested into, so it was not part of the opportunity for us.
Yes, Heidi.
I mean, to get started, doesn't it make sense already in your low input? If I understood both Anton and Etienne, they want to already add a legume and start to look at rotation effects, whether it's
Yeah, that's
healthy
true.
or groundnut, and maybe another sorghum or millet. That's probably things you could already integrate in your low input team. And then this longer list in the prioritization process, it sounds like it's maybe something different. If you guys, what I understand, already want to get a little bit more of a system with rotation. Intercropping, you need another crop anyway, so.
Yeah, we had this idea before, but still it's a problem of who can do that. I mean, for a postdoc, we have free time to do that, so we need to find, some other people also to lead a new exercise on millet or sorghum.
Is Adam here?
Can volunteer, Adam.
No. No. But so Adam is the person. Adam is our colleague, PhD student with Hohenheim, who is doing the intercropping, where he compares different intercropping models. And I'm not sure which crops. Which crops he's in fact now simulating or wanting to simulate, because we had some discussions about the databases, and so we are not sure yet, Heidi, which crops are in there, or are we now?
Copy sorghum. Isn't it cowpea maize? Copy sorghum, I think. Sorghum, okay. Yeah.
Okay. So we are doing already some. He is already coordinating simulations around cowpea.
You need your monocrop working.
Yes, of course. Yes. So yeah, we should link up with that. Kevin.
Yeah, so I just, I think that was helpful in your comment. Was, maybe there's two efforts that can be in parallel. There's the, maturing the more complex process-based models and the communities around specific crops, but then also looking at tools to prioritize, a wider range of crops. And it doesn't have to be necessarily process-based models for that. Even I think that, we could look at suitability modeling, we could look at different statistical approaches. I think there might be different ways to get at this prioritization effort on a shorter timeline than developing a multi-model ensemble for 20 crops. So I think that these two things can happen at the same time, and they both need to happen.
Yes, thank you. So if we come to this last question that they gave us, this word realistic is very important. So what do you think is a realistic timeline, and what can be our goals? Goals, I think we mean here, how many crops? Any suggestions, comments, ideas on this last question?
Well, how good is Tony? I think it depends on.
But I think your first thing is you need. Your first thing is to actually have a written up project protocol. These crops to do this.
Yeah, but no.
The timeline is that should be a few months from now.
No, but how many crops? We already, one crop or 4 experiments was already a huge task, huh? Or 5 experiments. How many we had in the first exercise? 5. And I don't know the week group. How? But you are better organized. You have many people there.
But we usually have, we don't have this luxurious situation of postdocs always. But we have.
Oh dear.
But no, it's a huge amount of work. The ET study with Jeff White, who, a retired genius, we worked maybe 2 years on putting together the ET data. Not all day long, but in your extra afternoon on Friday.
Yeah, from starting an exercise, in our case, to getting the paper out, how long, Cassian?
4 years. 3 years or 4 years. Yeah, it takes time. But
This thought you have the whole process less than a year and a half, I think.
Yes.
but we also use this blind phase. We can avoid to use a blind phase anymore where we have 2 phases of calibration. Maybe we can go quicker, maybe more simple with the protocol. But still, way to quality control data sets, to look for data, it takes months.
Okay, there is quite some uncertainty. We have to first get together and see in how far we get a team together that can do the job of comparing or simulating a few crops, opportunity crops, with a number of models. So that's one exercise that we want to do. Is there something else around opportunity crops that we want to develop within the AgMIP community? Or we say, this is it.
I mean, as I mentioned, I did talk with Kevin Pixley and we're discussing how we could use some information for modeling to support breeding. So I think that is something that we'll keep the community informed how those develop, I guess. But I think this would be the group that could contribute to it potentially.
Yes. So you are also talking with him and with Simit about funding opportunities.
Hopefully, yeah. I mean, we're very early stages, like concept note, but yeah, that's
Clearly, water stress has to be a big component of that if you're dealing with dry land. And again, that's groundnut, cowpea, millet.
So now that we are back here, so do people have some ideas about potential funding, donors, or potential calls for projects? Silence. So our group in Sirat, we are quite involved in AU calls, but there is very little scope for modeling work. In the calls that we know, but maybe people, please tell us if there are other opportunities and where we can sit together and write a proposal. Krishna.
Yeah, actually, I was thinking where we can submit, especially this year when we are having
Yes.
100 of some. Yeah, no, currently I don't have answer on this one. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
But I think that FCDO is funding CGs to do something with opportunity crops.
Who is that?
FCDO. FCDO, that's the UK.
Ah, okay. UK fund.
Yeah, UK fund. So I think last year I saw 2 proposals that I had to review. One led by ITA,
Yes,
another by IFPRI. So that could be a potential.
Can you follow up? We just got some funding in IITA. Is that from the same?
Yes, that's the one that she's referring to.
When is the next deadline for call?
I'm not sure, but the year before there was one, and last year there was one as well. The one for you before it was about a different theological. Last year was about the so I'm not sure what the thing is this year. I can keep up to date.
Okay, and there is some space to do modeling work, eh?
Yes.
Please.
Not really a direct opportunity for funding. But what I think is we call this, let's say, opportunity crops or neglected crops. Well, usually there is a reason why they are neglected. That's often that because there's no value chain, there's no demand. So maybe if we package a project which is also has a modeling component into a project which looks broader also into value chain development, it becomes more palatable for certain donors to fund such a project. That's an ID.
Yes, I think you are right. We cannot just have a project only on modeling. We have to put that in a more global project with more goals than just modeling output, or more outputs than just modeling. Yes, Heidi.
Since you guys are saying people that aren't here, but maybe we can just put the spotlight. Do you think there's opportunity in your economics world with your colleagues to? Because you somehow need the information for your global model, right? With this nutrition and.
Yeah, well, I'm not an economist myself. We are just basically supplying the economists with our crop yield data. Actually, we can also reach out to them also as the AgMIP team on ag economics, whether they are aware of anybody with Lancet progress going on. There may also be opportunities to fund more upstream where we are doing our work. That's what packing is good.
Yes, okay, that's a good point. We look at that. So we still have 15 minutes, but if we are done, for me it's fine. We don't have to. But let's go for a last round of comments. If people have, and then I will close. If people have more comments or questions or ideas that help us to make progress here.
You're commenting about value chain. Was involved in a Gates-funded project through the Livestock Innovation Lab, and this is in Burkina Faso and Ethiopia. And big issue there was fodder. And these 4 crops that we were just listing, cowpea, groundnut, grape fodder, and sorghum millet as well. And whether we can build in value chain there is the livestock production, because meat consumptions keep going up and we're missing the livestock component anywhere in this breakouts. But, I don't know, that's a different funding source, but Gates was funding that project.
Yeah, Gates Foundation. We are fine.
It's gone now.
Yes,
gone.
Yeah.
Hey, but yes.
Dennis and I are in a proposal together, and it's for German funding, and the project is actually called Food Diverse. Or diverse food diverse. And we have the defense on Monday morning, actually, online, and it has about 25 PhDs funded, and it's for a so-called collaborative research center, and they're a big deal in Germany. And they're partnered with the University of Ghana, and they've said conditional on getting this funding. And it's got like maybe 25 PhDs, but from economists, nutrition people, and agronomists, and kind of biodiversity. And they look at all kinds of diversification in the food system. And if they get this funding, they said we will then fund so-and-so projects at University of Ghana, which remain undefined yet. But maybe, Phyllis, if you come up with this concept note, this could also be an opportunity. But it's like conditional on the funding.
That's conditional funding.
Fingers crossed. Good luck.
I mean, we don't even have enough. It's
At least it's one step.
Yes.
and we think it's a very strong, I don't know if anyone knows Matt and Time. He's leading it with big nutritionists. So the agronomy people or modelers were a small part, but we think it's very good chance.
Yes. So yeah, I find it within AgMIP always a challenge to do activities that, like the intercomparison of models, where you don't have really funding but still do it. So because the postdoc that we have is also in another project, but we can just put this activity in his program, but he has to do other things also. So that is to me the challenge, to have a project that you can then defend as a whole project, but still do then the AgMIP activity, because it's very difficult, I think, to persuade donors to fund this kind of exercises. That's my feeling. I don't know whether you have other opinions about that. Grimberg.
No, I think just echoing what was mentioning, but I think we also need to leverage on the existing networks that we have, especially with institutions. There is a big drive to increase the number of PhD students in Africa, and there are several people who have, well, several institutes that have actually are in the process of funding an X number of PhDs. Does AgMIP have any linkages with some of these institutes to then leverage on some of these activities that we want to do? And I do know that each one of us is affiliated with an institute family, and to define one or two PhD funding. UNP6 was having the CJR program for PhDs, and they want to continue with an additional, I think, 20 or 50.
Yes.
Could we not have some to cut out for AgMIP and also programs? So I think one of the things that we need to do is also to map these networks that we have internally and see where we can actually approach this.
Yes, thank you. That's a good idea. UM6P, they may be interested to have at least one PhD into the crop modeling and yes. So shall I try to wrap up? So we have the low input agricultural systems team. I think we had our meeting on Monday. We know what we are going to do with the human resources we have. We didn't discuss a lot about that, but Antoine presented that. We focused here on opportunity crops. We kind of agreed that we want to do model simulations with the common mechanistic models and compare models for, let's say, 4 or 5 crops. We still have to see who is going to lead that. It seems that it is a new group, but connected to the low input agriculture systems group. Yes. And we are also, and Kevin is leading that, working on or discussing on other activities around opportunity crops that may get funding. And you will share the information. And then we will write a report. We have some interesting ideas about, the one I remember now is about UM6P, and the UK funding. So we know what to do now in the coming weeks and months to develop this further. Is that a good wrap up? Did I forget something? It's okay? Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Online?
Yes, online. Thank you also. We didn't receive a lot of comments, but if you have comments, please write it down and we will come back to you.
They have ideas.
Yes.
Do they have funding for it? Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Now, don't you need problem? Yes, right. So I follow up with you.
Yes, you can follow up.
So you have to talk or you introduce me to?
You're calling. I'll talk to Tony. Yes, okay. I need to just.
Yes. That's what I want.
Also, was resulting is more